I'm Amy Adams. I'm the Collections Information and Access Manager here at the National Museum of the Royal Navy, and I've been here for about a decade now, and my role has always involved what I like to call our data collection, so things like archives, libraries, photographic, film and sound collections, those kind of historic records that really hold our kind of historical data and knowledge. And then the other side of my role has always involved collections access, so making things available to the public, whether that's physically on our sites, making them accessible, or also digitally. So that's through things like our collections online, managing things like our collections database, so where we record all of our collections, etc. So today we're here in our collections centre. This is our one Storehouse 12 in Portsmouth. We have another site up in Yeovilton as well, which has a large collection centre, and we always say our collection is around 2 million individual items. Our collection is really varied. It kind of covers everything you could possibly think to do with the Navy. So we've got things like ship's badges, we've also got ship's mascots to do with them as well, ship's models, we always love a model. We've got musical instruments, weaponry, kit, uniform, artwork as well, and we also have really extensive archive and photographic collections as well. So in my role, while I've been here at the Navy, at National Museum of the Royal Navy for the last 10 years, really seen this kind of change in the data and the way we record things, and really thought that kind of work has grown in many ways. So things like online collections, the amount of data that we have to generate, and we expect things like our curators to now generate in order to really make those run efficiently is really kind of extreme in comparison to sort of even say 5, 10, 20 years ago, where somebody would have just recorded something on a card catalog with a couple of lines of description, maybe a number and a location. Now we really expect a lot of information for our curatorial and conservation teams to generate. So every possible piece of information about the item, its ownership, its condition, and then lots of keywords and things as well to improve that searching. So whether that's somebody internal trying to search for an item for say like exhibition, or also external for our online collections database, if those kind of keywords and tags aren't there, then our searching doesn't necessarily perform as well, because when you're dealing with a free text search, if somebody's put a spelling mistake, say in like Second World War, then it's not necessarily going to come up. So I've seen this kind of problem grow and have been wondering whether there's AI technologies for the last few years, whether they could exist to help us with this, kind of help transform how we do this type of work and assist us with it. So we've also looked at things like image collections. You know, we've recently got a digital asset management system in the last few years, and even going through that process of tendering, you know, we had suppliers using AI technologies to run on image recognition to generate keywords as well. So could we do something around that? In the spring of this year, we heard of an opportunity to work with the University of Southampton with their Cormus department, kind of enabling master students to kind of work their theses in workplaces and kind of in real world situations. So we thought, let's give it a go. Let's see whether we could present these problems to them, and whether the students could find solutions, and there was ways to kind of generate technologies that could help us with this. So we particularly looked at the first one, which is entity recognition. So we wanted to essentially take the really lovely descriptions and kind of brief descriptions our curators write about our objects, and see whether they could be run through AI technologies and generate the keywords. So if you had a description, could it pull out things like 7 Years' War, Second World War, somebody's name, a particular date, and generate that keyword list, and do that quicker than say it would take, you know, our curators half an hour, etc. to generate that. Also, could it kind of think beyond some of the biases we have as curators? So we'll naturally go to the more technical terms. So when we're writing descriptions or adding keywords, we might think to add the specific name of the ship. We might think to list a specific battle, but somebody might just want to type in ship, and we wouldn't necessarily think to add that to our collection. So could the AI also help with some of that and kind of add other search terms we wouldn't think about? Our other project is we wanted to look more into the image recognition and see whether we could kind of use AI to, again, generate some of the keywords and things from it. We have a particular photographic collection called the Wright and Logan collection, which is a local photographer who over quite a number of years took sort of ships portraits of warships entering and leaving Portsmouth Harbour. So they're kind of very stock standard images, and we thought that could be a good trial ground where they're quite similar and follow a certain format. Could we run that through AI technology and see, could that recognize that's a Type 35 destroyer or a submarine? How much could it recognize in that to kind of tell you what it's seeing in that image? So that was the other one that we thought we would kind of trial. And really we were just open to seeing whether it was even possible, whether it wasn't possible. We didn't know. It was really new to us.
So my name is Rodrigo. I'm a maritime archaeologist. I have more than 15 years documenting shipwrecks in my career, most of them on the water, and this has been doing this mapping of shipwrecks has been using quite a lot of new technologies most of the time. Some of the things that I've helped develop myself is to document shipwrecks and ships using photogrammetry and 3D modeling. So it's a new way of documenting sites, and it's really exciting because it's using images to create 3D models. And these images are very good for us as archaeologists because they give us that texture that sometimes a 3D model will miss. So we can wrap the 3D model with all these beautiful texture, which is very interesting for us, such as the things that you can see on HMS Victory. So we don't want to miss anything. We are obsessed with detail and we're obsessed with documenting every single part of it. And that's because archaeology is one of those things that are quite destructive by themselves, and you can see it by the work that we're doing. To understand the site, you need to destroy it almost in a very controlled way, but you have to document absolutely everything from the start. If not, you lose information, you lose potential information about cultures and people living on sites or on board ships. And that's what we're doing in the museum, is using these technologies to document the repairs of HMS Victory, because we know she's such an important vessel, and because we know she's been through so many repairs through time. We want to take every single detail of all her structure. At the moment we've removed the outer skin, which is called planking in terms of naval terms, which is basically planks following the curvature of the ship, following the frames of the ship, which will be considered the ribs of the ship. And now what we can see from both sides of the ship is the exposed frames. These exposed frames have been changed during different periods. So we have 1990s, 1980s, back to the 70s, 1920s, and back to the original days where the ship was still afloat and fighting in Trafalgar and other places. So we have, it's a bit of a palimpsest. It's like when you paint over another painting, this is what Victory is pretty much like it. So we need to document every single phase of that. How we do this, normally it will take an army of people, an army of contractor archaeologists going around drawing things, but we don't have that army. We don't have that many people. And instead of that, we want to use AI technologies to help us doing all the crunching all the data and doing all the heavy lifting of documenting. And therefore we've partnered with the University of Southampton to help us develop these technologies, these systems in AI, to put all that information we're collecting digitally into a bigger database and try to understand these changes throughout time. She's such an important site that we want to make sure that every documentation and everything we do is following a chronological order. And the idea of the project, of Holmes's project, is that an AI system will identify an image that has information from it, from our surveys, for example. And if that image is similar to other images that we haven't been very good at documenting, like someone coming with a phone and taking a random picture and going away and putting it in a specific folder, we want that picture we want the AI system to take that picture and check it through with the other picture. So to do an image matching. That image matching will then inherit the values of the picture we know everything about. So in a ship like this, in a 3D model like the one we're producing for Victory, this is a lot of images. It's about 3,000 images, and we need a lot of work being generated, and that's why we went with our partners for them to help us with these research questions that we have.
Would you do this again, Amy?
I think so, yeah. I think it's a really interesting project or projects, and I think there's a lot of scope for them to continue to grow in the future. I think one of the main things that we found was my thing that I was unsure of is this even viable? I have this great grand idea of what AI technologies could do for us and change for us, but I don't know whether that's even right or possible. I think one of the things that we realized quite quickly is actually it is possible what we're after. It just depends what level of accuracy you can take it to, but there's definitely something there that we could do. And I think really this just feels like the beginning of the journey rather than sort of the end. So I definitely think I would do it again.
Yeah, I think with AI though, it's always difficult because you think about Google and you think all these different places where are using AI in a very simple searches, in a very simple way. They're doing like everyday language. They're using everyday words that people are regularly using. But the collections we have are so specific because we have things like a battle cruiser, we have HMS Victory, we have things that are unique in the world, and we were thinking, can you actually create something AI related with the data that is almost unique? Because you need to get these like a lot of data that is the same to produce something important, or like the algorithms can run. But can you actually do it with individual things like we have in the collections? That's something that actually quite surprised me of some of the things we've seen so far actually.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really interesting things about bringing these technologies into museums and cultural sector more generally, is that we are knowledge institutions. We have a lot of knowledge, we sit on a lot of data, and we should be involved in the development of these technologies. Our kind of knowledge should be helping to develop some of these things. Would it be great if you asked your Alexa at home and she came up with an answer for, say, what is HMS Diamond from our collections? And that answer was really powered by us. So I think it's really interesting, and I think we should get more involved, and I don't think people should be afraid. Sometimes we can be a bit reticent in the heritage sector to jump on something new, and I think that actually we should be involved in helping to drive those conversations and drive these technologies. And people shouldn't be afraid to do that. Like if you go in with the mindset like we were, we said to the students from the outset, one of the responses could be that this fails, and thankfully we were in a place where that was okay. And that if it failed, that's okay, but we've learned from why it's failed and why it's not possible. And I think we could really help shape this better. And also I think the more we can come together as a sector with this, the more it doesn't feel so isolating trying to understand the technology alone, and the more we can compile our understanding and knowledge on it and kind of work together with other colleagues, and also build bigger data sets that sometimes this technology really needs to work on.
Yeah, and how applicable it is to, because we obviously took an idea that it was grown from in the museum, within the museum, from archaeologists, from historians, from curators. And then we put it out there to computer scientists that they've never had any interaction with any kind of museum that we know of, at least from the team that we have. And it was almost ideal for us because we had this question and we went, actually, can you do this for us? And it was like a commission. We like to be involved, but we don't want to be doing all the grunt that is behind, like preparing the AI and all that. And these guys, that's what they do for a living. So it shows how sometimes you need to think a little bit outside the box and go to the actual experts, which these guys are, and interchange expertise. Even though we know some of AI and the museums has developed a lot of technologies around this kind of new ways of documenting history, these guys are the experts, and that's something that I will carry on doing for like a long time, because that really help. And the fact that also they have a deadline, so it's done, and we know when it's done, so we can expect things really quickly. So that was brilliant.
I think, you're so right. I think that partnership between different sectors, like one of the things I went in and was constant, because I think your knowledge now is probably stronger than mine. I just have the conceptual idea of it, and that fear of like, am I going to understand all these new terms and like what they're actually coding? And I can say I don't know anything more really than I did at the start, but I think that's the point, like you're saying, they're the experts. It's about collaborating with them. They have the knowledge and really understanding that focus and having a goal on how you want this technology to assist, how it can help you, and really that partnership and seeing, I think one of the most rewarding things for me is seeing how interested they've been in our institution and how we operate in our sector really, because I think it's all quite new to them as well, like even some of the tutors and things which you'll hear from some of them in a little bit about how their view of our sector and how these technologies could be applied, because they're quite prolific in other sectors, but they haven't really come here yet. And I think they're as excited to collaborate with us as we were with them, really, which was great.
Yeah. When we were asking them about why you didn't go to Google or to IBM to do a placement, because this is really their placement for the master's work. Why did you come to a museum? And they all literally turned around and said, because this is way more interesting.
Yeah.
So there is that interest from their side as well. It's good for us because it's doing something different for us. But it's also good for them because they never get involved with these kind of data sets. And it's a challenge for them because they realize that not everything is big data, like the kind of stuff they're used to. So I would say big thanks to them.
Yeah, and massive thanks. I think it's all about finding the right partner, and we found absolutely great partners with the University of Southampton and the tutors for the students as well as the students themselves. It's been really great. So definitely find the right people to work with, I think, is the biggest lesson learned.
Sure.
So could you tell us just very briefly, like 30 seconds, really short, the project you've been working on as you understand it?
Yeah. Firstly, I divide the data set into 3 sets, and I use the convolution neural network with resonate architecture in the PyTorch library to train the model, and I classify the image from 9 different categories. And during this process, I employ transfer learning by loading pre-trained weights that were provided officially, and this significantly reduced training time and improved accuracy. First, the project is really interesting, and it combines technology with history, which is something I hadn't thought about before. I feel very honored to have the opportunity to work with the National Museum, and it has been a truly enjoyable experience. And you guys always placed your trust in me.
Yeah. So the work I'm doing on this project is on text mining, focusing on keyword extraction. So the keywords are to be extracted from the description column in the database. This description column has descriptions of various objects as well as artifacts. So why the keywords are being extracted is that so that from these descriptions, the keywords will tell us of the associated subject for these descriptions. At present, the association subject column is being determined manually. The purpose of extracting these keywords is that the association subject column can be determined automatically so that it requires less human work. The automation is the reason we are doing the keyword extraction. When I came to know that this is a project by the National Museum of the Royal Navy, it seemed quite interesting. I hadn't done any project with Royal Navy Museum anywhere before. Also, I knew that if it's the Royal Navy Museum, I would get to know, read about various historical objects, artifacts, like everything in the database will have a historical significance. So that seemed quite interesting to me.
Yeah, I think the most interesting part is because it's a sort of unusual type of area. So, I mean, it's not too uncommon for private companies to have like proprietary data, but this type of data is, imagery is, fairly common, but on particular sort of this type of historical heritage type of stuff that, no one takes photos of, basically. I mean, all we will ever get to see is basically physically visiting. So it's just super interesting to see how it will basically work out in a sort of real life scenario. and what we can do in a short amount of time for something that we have basically never seen before.
So I'm currently working on the image classification problem for the HMS Victory's conservation works. First and foremost, the conservation work is generating an intense amount of image data that is at some point it becomes manually impossible to classify so much and classify and segregate such a huge amount of data. So the intention is to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to create a system that is swift and efficient when it comes to classifying all of those images, so that there is no need for a person to sit and manually copy paste or cut paste each of those images into separate folders. The machine should be able to do that. That's the central idea of the problem. So first of all, when I visited Portsmouth Dockyard for the first time, looking at HMS Victory, it was the nation's Navy emblem in all its glory. When the opportunity came up to actually work on something like this, it wasn't an opportunity I wanted to give up on. So that was the biggest motivation, and to add to it that it was work related to something that I intend to pursue a career in. I felt like that was a very good starting point for me to explore my opportunities and especially work on such a privileged project like the HMS Victory. So that was one of my biggest motivators to do this.
So how does this compare, Edwin, you spoke about it a little bit already, but how does this compare to kind of work you've done in other areas? So maybe with other sectors or companies?
Yeah, I think in relation to other sectors, the most interesting part is basically on the resolution of the image, because most of the time people don't take such high resolution because they don't need to. For example, like if we are just taking, say, the most common things that you look at, I don't know, fashion, for example, you take a pose of someone of clothes, you don't need this to be in 4K, right? That's just unnecessary. We can tell most of the info with something very low res, and it's very easy, or not really easy, but have a lot more wiggle room to basically process in terms of both complexity and computational power. So I think that's the most interesting part of basically how we're trying to process this in a sort of like semi-automated and sort of like not completely, just busting the CPUs to the max. And yeah, it's, from that perspective, it's very interesting.
Great, thank you.
Like Professor Edwin said, it was a very unique kind of a project because usually so far when we've done in training and testing models, we've only used information that is readily available on some data set which is already classified and segregated, and all you have to do is upload that data set into your environment and just process it directly. But here the difference was that the images were, like he said, were not only high resolution, but they were also captured from multiple different sources. So there were although it was overall it was an image, there was just all different kinds of information that was also coming in through the image, and that was interesting, complex, yes, but also very interesting to figure out even the starting point of how to proceed with this problem in the first place, let alone doing the entire processing at a later point. So that was something that was very interesting about this project.
So my name is Bart Baesens. I'm a professor of data science at the Catholic University of Leuven and also a lecturer at the University of Southampton. And I'm really excited to collaborate with the National Museum of the Royal Navy because it kind of combines both my passion and my profession in a very exceptional way. I've always been very passionate by history, and being able to combine this with one of my key professional skills, being analytics, is really very exciting. And at the moment, we are working at two very exciting projects in the sense that we had a very big extract of text information from the Axial content management systems, which is one of the content management systems that is being run by the National Museum of the Royal Navy. And purpose of our first project is to look at the text that was given to us and extract keywords from that. So we're going to use all kinds of software packages to look at the text, to parse the text, understand the text, and then extract keywords from it. But we're not only going to do that, we're going to actually take it even one step further and look at also how we can enrich the keywords using the very popular large language models like ChatGPT and so on. And to be a little bit more specific and give you an example, suppose we have a piece of text that talks about Gallipoli, which was one of the big battles of the First World War, as some of you may remember. What we're going to do is we're going to start from that keyword Gallipoli, try to first extract it from the text description that we have available, and then enrich it further, like with Dardanelles, which is one of the synonyms used for that battle, the year in which it took place, which I think it spanned 2 years, 1915 to 1916. Then the armies that were involved in it, I think that were the British and the French army against the Ottoman Empire. So these are all enrichings of the text that we can provide and that we're going to do using keyword extraction on the one hand, and then textual enrichment on the other hand. That's the first project that we've been working on, and a very interesting project. And then a second project that we've been working on is on image analysis, in the sense that we had a very unique collection of black and white images that were taken by two Portsmouth-based photographers named Wright and Logan. And those images are images of ships like destroyers, cruisers, frigates, sloops, corvettes, carriers, submarines, and so on. And they were taken between 1924 and 1998. And our purpose is to look at those images and see whether we can automatically classify those images using some very recent analytical techniques like deep learning. Because if we could do that, once the National Museum of the Royal Navy gets new images, they can use our AI system to automatically classify these images. So I think it will be of great assistance to help them label future images as they receive them from various types of people. So really excited about this work, because we also think it poses a very interesting research challenge. So we're also, obviously, we're researchers, we're scientists, so we're also in it for the scientific challenge.
Hi, I'm Seppe van Broucke. I'm a professor at Ghent University, also a guest lecturer at University of Leuven. So indeed, we're making use of a set of techniques classified as deep learning techniques. They have been utilized for quite a while. We know that AI is making the rounds currently. It's pretty much a hype in industry overall, which is also one of the reasons why it's so exciting to work on this project, because it's kind of a break in terms of the normal topics and contexts that we used to work in. And I myself am also a bit of a history buff, so that's also nice. So indeed, as Bart has said, so currently we're working on 2 projects. So if you look at a text-based project, obviously there we're going to make use of a couple of established approaches, entity extraction, parts of speech tagging, that sort of stuff. But we will also investigate the applicability of large language models, of which the most well-known one nowadays is ChatGPT, obviously. But there are also a couple of other ones, including, and that's also quite important, a couple of non-commercial open source ones. So it will also be interesting to kind of validate whether they would also be useful and how they compare to one another. The other project, which has to do with image classification for now, there we will first of all make use of a set of techniques which is called convolutional neural networks. They have been well known about for quite a while. They're also quite established, but also there are some interesting challenges that are at play in this project. For instance, the fact that the images are black and white, that they are a different quality, that we have a whole set of labels that you can attach to them, and a whole set of tasks as well. Because as Bart has said, the first task is to classify them in terms of type, submarine, cruiser, frigate, and so on. But you could also look at trying to predict the time frame in which the picture was taken, for instance, and things like that. And thinking even further, one could even dream about very clever applications of current generative AI, where, for instance, you would think about the conversion of a 2D picture to a 3D model, which would really give like new insights in terms of moving around the space, looking at the objects in that space, and so on. That's thinking a little bit ahead, but those also offer very exciting opportunities, which we can do with the very recent models that are available nowadays.
So do you see any kind of like ethical challenges for the sector? Because obviously we're working from like a public sector where we're dealing with public funds, and also being museums, you know, people see us as institutions of knowledge and understanding. Do you see any kind of like ethical concerns in combining these kind of technologies in the kind of museum or heritage sector?
Well, I think as soon as you start processing personal data, it's always important that every person is aware of the data that is being used about them. So that's really very important. And sometimes even in pictures or textual description, you can have personal details. So one has to be very careful once you start disclosing information about that and once you start using that for analytics. So I think that is, for example, a first ethical challenge that one should be properly be aware of.
And more widely, do you see, like, obviously this is kind of quite new to the heritage and public sector generally, like applying these technologies. Do you kind of see the future application for them, and whether this is like something that you think has, I think you've touched on it each a little bit, but kind of where do you see this going, and perhaps changing our sector in museums and heritage?
Well, we want with both of the projects that we're doing with the National Museum of the Royal Navy, we want to come up with some scientific publications because we're researchers, right? So we're in it for the research as well. So I already did a preliminary literature review, and I can say when looking at some of the history journals like Journal of Documentation, Journal of Archaeology, etc., we see that AI is not commonly being used there yet. So I think it has a great potential to process various types of archaeological data, image data, audio data, video data, text data, all kinds of unstructured data, because that's where modern day AI is specifically focused on. It's focused on processing unstructured data like multimedia data. And doing a very preliminary literature review, we haven't found much usage of it yet within the context of history and archaeology.
On top of that, maybe to add, most of the usage that we found was based on rather initial models or models that by now are considered already a little bit outdated. Sometimes also, and that's maybe also an important remark to make, sometimes also using very limited data sets, in which case one always needs to also be a little bit careful when applying these techniques. That's something important to know when using them. And I think an important aspect also there, which is also important to focus on, is keeping a human in the loop, obviously, who can validate your findings, who will, especially in this space, always have a huge breadth of domain knowledge and expertise about these things, which is very important to check back on. And also then highlighting the explainability aspects of the models that we built. That we have some techniques for that nowadays, but in essence, you're building very black box models, which do a lot of number crunching, but you don't have an idea how or why they come to their conclusion. So then putting that explainability layer on top of that, so that humans also get some insights out of how these models come to their decisions and how they work, is, I think, also very an interesting angle there as well.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. I think that's a good comment. Sorry, Bart, did you want to add
Can
something?
I link this back, because this point that separates is a very relevant point, especially for the image recognition project, because, you know, all the black and white images that we got from you guys, we manually labeled them using some labelers, and now we want to put them into some type of convolutional or deep learning neural network, as Seppe rightfully mentioned. But we will then also look at the insights that that network gives us, like a ship can be easily recognized in terms of its pennant number. So we're kind of hoping that the deep learning neural network catches up on that and tries to understand what pennant number could be available in the image, as such being able to properly classify the image as a destroyer, as a cruiser, etc.
Do you see the kind of sector, you know, and even the talk about ChatGPT and stuff, and that kind of ethical concern for us and from our kind of point of view in the sector of, you know, where are these things trained? What kind of information and data are they training on? Do you see more kind of partnerships between our sector and kind of your areas of work in sector, whether that could like help some of these technologies, and whether actually more partnerships like this could be beneficial for kind of both areas of study?
I think partnership is usually a good thing. So I think also in this area, it's all about data and enriching data, right? And you guys have particular types of data available, and ChatGPT has been trained also on historically available data, but on a tremendous amount of corpus of data. So I think it will offer a tremendous potential also for enriching the data that you guys have internally available. So pooling data, combining data, linking data, obviously this seems quite obvious, but it's not. I mean, you also have to take care of data quality, etc. But it's a very important way to gain more knowledge about what's in your data. It's combining data, pooling it together with external data, and I think in that respect, LLMs definitely have something valuable to offer.